The Deshaun Watson experiment, for now, has come to an end. Jameis Winston is going to be coming in. The first four letters of his last name are wins, so we'll see if he can turn things around for the 1-6 Browns. But we'll go and kind of start with the elephant in the room in that Deshaun Watson was the our statistical bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL this year. All the issues with that, he is out for the Browns now. My curious thought for you is, do you think this is gonna be an addition by subtraction? Or do you think that this team is so completely broken that it doesn't even matter at this point?
This is hard for me because I've said since before he started a single game in Cleveland that this was a terrible option. Not for anything off the field, purely on the field reasons. And what I mean, and I stand by it, is this offense has not, will not, and never will be made for a player similar to Deshaun Watson. Never has been, never will be. It is made for players like Joe Flacco. It is made for players like Jameis Winston, where you minimize the amount of extra concerns in his eyes. He has Nick Chubb back in Jameis. He knows how to run this offense. Play action, run first, not the West Coast run first where you have a bunch of different dynamic pieces. No, this is purely old school run first. You'll find a guy in the flats coming across the middle of the field or running deep down the sideline. Those are your three options, and we all know Jameis can throw a deep ball. He did it plenty of times to both teams in his heyday. You know, we haven't seen him really light it up the same way since he got his eye surgery, but we do know he can do it as he did in New Orleans. So, yeah, I don't think, first of all, Deshaun being gone is going to hurt the Browns. But at the same time, I do think you do lose something extra when you lose a Deshaun. And while we didn't see a lot of it, there were moments prior to the injury in this last game and even the week before where you saw him get out of the pocket and make plays and get first downs that he shouldn't have gotten. But again, the rest of this offense was not made for him. And I do think there's a situation where you talk about the rest of the team ego and all those. And, I'm not here to try to speculate on what the chemistry is in that locker room. But from living in the area, from hearing it, from seeing and hearing what happened as Deshaun was being carted off, you have to wonder if it's not a better situation for the Browns as a whole.
I got a little bit of a little checklist I'm gonna go down here, so y'all have to bear with me here because I got a lot for this one. We're gonna start with the initial question posed. I think we all kind of owe Billy O'Brien a slight apology, not for his butt chin or anything else he's done, but when he was the head coach in Houston, he had Deshaun humming. And some of the reports were he had simplified the offense from the quarterback spot to the point where there was times in practice there was a report he was looking at Bill O'Brien on the sideline, like you see in college when they look to the sideline for the play. They basically made an offense cater to exactly what he did at Clemson. And it works pretty well. They got it to work at that case. It helps when you have DeAndre Hopkins, Kenny Stills, Laramie Tunzel, and a lot of those guys too. But they had made it to the point where it could work. Like you mentioned, it was basically completely spread out for the most part, very limited traditional quote unquote run game. And he was also younger and not injured and didn't have 3 years of football missed. So he was a true athlete. So when he had to escape, he could Houdini his way through things at his absolute best. And when you end up not playing for 3 years, you get a little bit older, your legs get banged up, you tear your ACL twice. Now your Achilles, that's bound to go a little bit. So he misses that. B, with as far as the Jameis Winston part of it, I agree with you. People forget Jameis Winston was good the last time we saw him with the Saints as a starter. They were 5-2, and he had 14 touchdowns to 3 picks. So Jameis with vision wasn't throwing the 30 picks that everyone likes to remember. He's not darker Jay Cutler like everyone likes to think of. He threw 5,000 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 30 picks in a season. The next time we saw him as a starter 2 years later, he was efficient, rolling. The Saints were up on the Buccaneers in that game, the Tom Brady-led Buccaneers, before his knee exploded. And then he just really hasn't played much since. For some reason, the Saints inexplicably never threw him out there except week 18 last year, and they scored, and he got Jamal Williams in the end zone. And so we'll see with that one. I think that's going to be very beneficial. I think David Njoku is going to be used a lot more now that he's healthy too. That play action, find the tight end. If Jerry Jeudy can catch the ball, he's going to be utilized a lot there. Elijah Moore, I think a lot of these different routes will open up. James is probably sitting like, really? You couldn't have held on to Amari Cooper for one more week. Just let me have that one more time. The last thing I'll mention too is there was a lot of talk with the booing as he was getting carted off, that sort of thing, or the cheering as he's getting carted off. The booing beforehand. while yes, I feel like there's no right answer here. So we're gonna try and walk a tightrope here. And not the surgery that all the Alabama players get, like a normal tightrope here. More or less, in theory, yes, the act of booing someone is always wrong. It's morally incorrect. But the situation you did by bringing him in there amidst everything, while he and giving him that contract when he had not played for 600 days or whatever it was, knowing his suspension was looming, and so you structured his contract so he only had like a $1 million salary that first year. So if he did get fined and missed time, he wasn't missing anything. You basically try to finagle the system that way. And he had just signed a contract with Houston that he had not played a single down under. He signed an extension there, did not play down with them, so you ripped that up and gave him the biggest contract in history. You can't really yell at the people for booing on their morality when you sacrificed your own morality. At that point, you kind of I'm trying to think of how to word it. I don't say you sold your soul at that point, but you did kind of you said, "You know what? We're sacrificing our morality and you have to accept it, but oh, you have to keep your morals." It's kind of backwards if that makes sense too. Like not saying to condone injuries, we're not even touching that really at this point. It's the overall reaction as well. And at the same time, you were 1-6, and he was kind of a part of the problem. So no matter what people were they booed his entrance. The only reason people showed up was to cheer Nick Chubb at that point with him being
Yeah.
back. And you could see in those entrances. So I won't dive too much deep in that, but I think the discourse surrounding I'm happy that we're gonna get away from that for a little bit. This week's been annoying anyone who follows the Cleveland Browns space, if you will. But
Yeah.
I'm excited to see Jameis Winston, honestly. I think it's gonna be very interesting. We're gonna see what is the problem. Can Kevin Stefanski also not giving up play calling duties to Dorsey, which that's interesting considering last time we saw Ken Dorsey, he had Josh Allen and had him looking like Jay Cutler. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't until he got fired that Josh Allen turned it around a bit. So we'll see. It's a mess there, and you know what? Any of those futures bets on them making the playoffs, those are gone now. Like
Yeah.
those are out of the
Yeah.
way. So I'm mad about that still too. But it's a mess there, and you know what? It's all could have been avoided. Joe Flacco is still around.
Yeah. And he
Maybe Joe
wanted to be in
Flacco is
Cleveland.
better than we all thought too, because now he's doing it in Indianapolis.
Yeah. And let's not forget, Joe Flacco requested to stay in Cleveland. He was happy to stay in Cleveland. He wanted to be there. I do want to just throw this out there just because you mentioned the booing and all that cheering afterwards. Nobody's ever going to mistake Cleveland Browns fans for being passionate. If anybody's ever watched a Browns team, they sat through 0-16. What was it 1-33
133, yeah.
for forever? They had better statistics during that time period than what they have had under Deshaun,
They
which
still
is
have yet to
wild to
score
think of.
20 points. There are
And
3
yet, you
MLB teams that scored 20 points this year. They just called them runs. The A's have
yeah,
scored 20 points this year.
exactly. And the wildest thing to me is you're still selling out these games, and these players are still or these fans are still showing up. They're still there. They are still passionate. They are a stock away from owning this team, like the Packers. Just think about that. That is how passionate they are. Packers fans, I think, are probably the pinnacle of what is actually passion in the NFL as far as a fanship goes. I think Cleveland is 1B in that conversation. And yes, I do see it on a regular basis. I live in Northeast Ohio. It is regular. We've been to tailgates. We did a whole tailgate at a Cleveland Browns game. Like, we've seen it firsthand. But I don't appreciate anybody cheering somebody getting injured, period. I think that was classless. But before I get lambasted, because I still have to go to work tomorrow, you know, I I have to say I understand it. For players on the field, it sucks. That's your for all the outfield stuff, put that aside for a moment. On the field, that's your on-field brother. There's no politics, there's no outside whatever when you're in between the white lines. So for me, it's hard to look at that and be like, "Oh, man, it's okay." No, it's not
Not
okay to
okay, but
boo.
I'm not gonna throw a stone for my nice comfy glass house either,
I
like,
I think it was the commentary of the chants that makes it so much worse. And if you haven't heard those, go listen to them. They're all over social media. It is what it is. But yeah, I think you're right though. The Browns organization, they sold their soul. There's no doubt about this. And they're right now the Browns are kind of going through it. That all this with Watson, and now the team has announced that they're going to try to focus on a plan to move the stadium out of Cleveland, downtown Cleveland, and into Brook Park, which is a really nice stadium, and I really like the idea. But obviously, Browns fans don't like that as much. So, I don't know. it's a tough situation. But yeah, I don't appreciate the booing side of things when somebody's injured, but I get it. I from a fan standpoint, I would love to boo the Cowboys every single moment. But there's time and place as well. I think it's part of it, and so not a great look for everybody. But hopefully for the Browns, they'll figure themselves out.
Last thing I'll touch on with that too before we'll move on out of there too is I think his name was Danny Perkins. His name eludes me, and I apologize if I'm getting it wrong. He's a national radio guy that I saw something they did. Kind of touched on it too. The worst part about the whole discourse was afterwards it was painted with Watson and the Browns as victims getting booed. That they
Yeah,
were martyrs and victimized. This is a situation where there's real actual alleged victims, so we will not be making anybody a victim there. That is a
exactly.
very shitty injury and you will be out for 9 months. That is completely like, let's chill with let's chill with everything else too. And it was absolutely what's funny is, the people that are unintentionally funny, like they were being 100% serious or they just don't know they're funny, but they are funny.
Yeah,
The best part about this whole thing was when Myles Garrett was standing up for him. Good teammate, everything like that. But he said he's been a model citizen throughout college and most of his NFL career. The fact that he
yeah.
had to say most of his NFL career is just he couldn't actually say it the straight face, even though he was trying to, which was unintentionally hilarious. But either way,
And
we could
every Browns player I've seen an interview from right now has said the same thing. Yeah, on the field, it's great to have them. Very specific wording though on that, and I'll just leave it at that.
exactly. We're thou shall not cast stones from the comfort of thy glass house, but at the same time, the situation where let's not try and make anyone a victim here, especially with everything that has surrounded what got us to this point in the first place, is how I look at it as well. Don't love the act, but at the same time, you made your own bed here. You mentioned the passion too, and their actual passion, not rowdy Philadelphia passionate,
Yeah.
not violently passionate like normal passionate. But
No, they
either way,
beat up each other. Like the Browns fans beat up each other. They don't beat up other people.
exactly
They
like they
don't do
be.
what the Ravens guy does and go punch people in the middle of the street.
Oh, I wish I was at that Ravens game, but that's another story.